Now on BBC One, Inside Out.
Welcome to a new series of Inside Out for Yorkshire and Lincolnshire with me, Toby Foster. Here's what's coming up tonight. The hidden misery of the baby boom generation.
Who am I going to be when I retire? And what am I going to do? The future can be quite frightening, really.
With record numbers of older people suffering depression, we investigate why the problem is being ignored.
People are suffering unnecessarily from something which is essentially a treatable condition in most cases.
Also tonight, who's going to pay for your care when you get old? How the spiralling costs of an ageing population needs radical solutions. And the untold story of Lincolnshire's role in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The tension had really built up to a great big peak, because we really didn't know what was going to happen. Neither did the rest of the world, really.
Now, we're all living longer, but it seems that instead of looking forward to a happy retirement, many of us are facing decades of misery in our twilight years. It's estimated that 1 in 4 older people suffers from anxiety or depression, with services to help them few and far between. I've been looking at what's been done to tackle this hidden problem.
They're supposed to be the golden years, but for people like Christine Cook, growing old has sometimes failed to provide even a silver lining.
It was probably about 18 months or so before I retired when it was sort of looming large, and I got very anxious and quite depressed about it. Obviously going to work full time, you have a persona, so it was sort of the thought of, you know, I don't know who I am, who am I going to be when I retire, and what am I going to do?
For older people, we just don't have the research to understand how much of their need is around being an older person and how much of it is around a mental health condition that they're living with.
There's a big unmet need there. People are suffering unnecessarily from something which is essentially a treatable condition in most cases.
From the outside, Christine's life looked full of positives. She held down a rewarding job and successfully raised a family. But as her age started to mount up, so did her worries.
I think there are three main ones. One is health issues. The other is money. And the third is loneliness, really. It's sort of, and if you sort of combine all those three together, the future can be quite frightening, really.
But although Christine might feel isolated, she's far from alone.
According to some estimates, as many as 1 in 4 elderly people could be suffering from anxiety or depression. And that figure could just be the tip of the iceberg.
Depression's really important amongst older people. It's really very common, and a substantial proportion of older people, their depression won't be recognised or picked up by their general practitioner. So we think that about 50% of cases with of people with depression won't be receiving any treatment at all.
According to mental health charities, looking after the emotional needs of the elderly is already costing the NHS millions. And unless steps are taken to tackle the problem, the cost and the impact on society as a whole is only going to get worse.
As people get older, they access the health services more, really because of they get higher incidence of chronic disease. People with depression are more likely to develop physical illness as well, and it's the combination of physical disease and depression that can make it harder to diagnose as people get older.
Worrying about the mental health of the elderly is a relatively new phenomenon. Grandparents who'd survived the Second World War were seen as a group who grinned and bared life whatever it threw at them, an attitude which may well have masked the real story.
Now, figures from the Mental Health Foundation show that people between the ages of 55 and 65 are twice as likely to seek help for depression or anxiety as those beyond retirement age. The baby boomers are going to need help.
That transition from the routines of working, maybe working away, to actually not having those routines in life anymore is quite difficult for people. And a lot of people actually look forward to their retirement, don't they? So sometimes their expectations aren't met.
The opportunities to travel, socialise, you know, go on holidays and you know, all the things that you perhaps dream about and that you've worked towards. And then sort of reality strikes home, you know, when you suddenly realise that no, actually you're not going to be able to do any of these things.
At the University of York, the UK's biggest ever study into the mental health of the elderly is underway. A 5-year, £2.5 million research project is trying to find some answers.
For a long time, older people with depression have had very few treatments available to them when they're looked after by their general practitioner, other than the prescription of antidepressant medication. And I think there is a general sense that people haven't appreciated just how important depression is up until more recently.
Among the tests being trialled are talking therapies over the phone.
What we talked about last time was thinking about one of the things that you mentioned that you feel help you to stay well. And
as part of the research, 1,000 case studies will help develop a model of psychotherapy support, which is hoped will influence future NHS policy on how to deal with depression in the elderly. The focus is on changing attitudes and expectations.
They seem to say that they feel very comfortable working over the telephone, and they seem to, you know, to discuss things with me in as much depth as they would do if I saw them face to face. If there's particular things that they're not able to do anymore, then we might talk about what they actually got out of doing that activity. What other sorts of activities could they do that would give them that those things, really.
A study by the London School of Economics puts the cost to the country of depression at £23 billion in terms of benefit costs and lost days. But once you've passed working age, then your emotional needs really aren't seen as a high priority.
Mental health services will tend to move people on at 60, 65 into older people's services. But of course, people don't retire from having a mental health difficulty. Losing the support that you've had and going into a generic older person service with no specialist support can be a hugely confusing and difficult time for that person.
Charities say with healthcare expenditure unlikely to rise in the foreseeable future, watching for signs of depression in the elderly is a responsibility we all must bear. While spotting depression amongst the elderly might be complex, so are the cures. Isolation is one of the most common causes of anxiety, and for Christine, keeping busy has been a key part of her recovery.
I've been through the talking therapies, the antidepressants and the tranquilizers, you know, all that sort of thing. And it got to the stage where I'd be well for a period of time and then I'd just relapse and go back again. But I found that when I was well and I was actually doing something, whether it was, you know, an art project or I was involved in something, then I felt much better.
Helping out at a craft centre at a local mental health group provides two-way support.
I need a focus for every day, really, so my diary is full. But I found that, you know, I need that I've got a reason to get up in the morning.
For people like Christine, the lack of a coordinated approach to mental health care for the elderly has led to her finding her own solutions. It's hoped that the study being undertaken in York can give a greater understanding of what's needed to help an ageing population come to terms with that process.
We think we're doing important research that has the potential to transform the care for depression in the NHS and to ensure that there's a wider range of treatment options available for people with depression and to potentially ensure that people with depression receive treatment, because that's just not happening at the moment.
Their findings might come too late to have a significant impact on Christine's life. But for the time being, she's happy doing all she can to help herself and others through an increasingly problematic area of mental health, which many feel has been neglected for far too long.
It's made a huge difference. When I retired, I was really scared, really, about being at home on my own day in and day out. And so coming here means I can use my skills. It makes me feel useful and contributing to something. And hopefully my experience of having, you know, mental health problems makes me sympathetic and empathetic, really, to everybody here.